The scope of this video will be to perform a simulated ransomware attack across all devices within an Active Directory domain. The simulation will not encrypt files, rather it will simulate events during a ransomware incident. The PowerShell script was written and tested by myself. The following tasks will be completed in this ransomware simulation. We will obtain a list of devices on the coffee.local domain. We will perform telnet testing on WinRM HTTP port 5985. We will then exploit group policy by configuring the coffee.local default domain policy, by setting the Windows Remote Management or WinRM service to start and automatically start up, and by disabling all firewall profiles. We will also perform another telnet test on WinRM HTTP port 5985. We'll then deploy a PowerShell script to perform a ransomware simulation, which will obtain a list of all devices on the coffee.local domain, utilize the invoke-command PowerShell cmdlet across all devices at the same time, search for specific data files, rename all data files with a 6-character code, leave a ransomware note within each directory, and leave a ransomware note in the startup directory. This ransomware simulation will be a follow-on from the previous video or exercise whereby a Microsoft Windows Server 2012 R2 domain controller was exploited with a brute force password attack. In the previous exercise, the domain administrator username and password was compromised. Following on from this, the coffee.local group policy will be compromised to allow PowerShell script to be run and to deploy ransomware, or in this case, a simulation of it. The next part of this exercise is to log on to the domain controller. We've skipped ahead and done this already. The infiltrator would have logged on to the domain controller via RDP or Microsoft Remote Desktop Services. The first thing that would happen is we will display who we are, so we can see we're on the coffee domain and we are logged on as a domain administrator. The next thing the infiltrator will do is try to obtain a list of devices on the Active Directory domain. In this instance, for the simplicity of this exercise, we only have 2 devices here. The first is the one we are currently logged into, which is testdc01. The second is testfs01. Now, in a real life scenario, there would be hundreds, if not thousands of devices within the Active Directory domain. Now, the infiltrator will try to determine a way to obtain access to these devices. So we'll now run a telnet test on testfs01.coffee.local on port 5985, which is the WinRM HTTP port. This telnet test would have been successful by now. This telnet test is going to fail. As we can see, we have an error, could not open connection to the host on port 5985, connect failed. Generally speaking, this would be for one of 2 reasons or both. The first reason being a firewall, the second reason being the service not started or set to automatic startup. In regards to firewalls, there are generally 3 types of firewalls that are utilized. The first is a cloud provider firewall, which is dominant and utilized in cloud environments. The second is a physical firewall, which is utilized for on-prem by infrastructure teams. And the third, which is what we'll be using, is an operating system firewall. Operating system firewalls generally are not recommended, yet for the purpose of this exercise and to demonstrate firewalls, we will be utilizing the Microsoft Windows operating system firewall. If we take a look, we can see that the firewall is enabled on this device. We can also see that the Windows Remote Management Service, WinRM, has been disabled and is not set to automatic startup. On test FS01, we'll also see the same thing. The next thing to do is to disable firewalls across the domain and enable the WinRM service to start and set it to automatic startup. First, the infiltrators will open the group policy management. They will then move to do the service first. So under Preferences, Control Panel Settings, Services, we can add the service here. First we select Automatic Startup. We find the service within the list, WinRM or Windows Remote Management, and we set that to Start Service. Select Apply and OK. The next thing we need to do is go to the Firewall Settings. So under Windows Settings, Security Settings, we locate Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. We expand this and click on Windows Firewall with Advanced Security again. Windows Firewall properties here show that this setting is not configured. In this instance, we will turn it off. As we can see, for all the profiles, the Windows Firewall is set to off, and the WinRM service has now been created on the group policy object to start the service and set it to automatic. This can take around 15 minutes or even longer to go across all devices within the domain, depending on the Active Directory replication. I'll now go ahead and pause this video and continue once this has been replicated to both devices. And we are back. Now what we can see here is the same page we were previously on, which was Group Policy Management Editor. Now in this next step, what I will do is perform another telnet test to test fs01.coffee.local on port 5985, and this succeeds. Now the next thing that I'll do is check the firewall settings on test FS01. Now the firewall settings are disabled. Now what this means is that it is off, and this could be part of the reason why we are having a successful telnet port test on port 5985 from test DC01. Now coming back to test DC01, we are now in a position to deploy the script. This script here is a PowerShell script, and I've written it in PowerShell to keep it native with the other systems. First, it will obtain a list of all the AD computers within the domain. Then what it will do is invoke a command which will create this ransom note. It will basically move on to look for certain file types such as .ldf, .doc, .xls, .bmp, .mdf, and excluding the C drive Windows directory. The reason these scripts will exclude certain directories is because when they deploy the ransomware, what they really want to do is ensure that you can still operate around your systems, so see what has happened, but from a business functionality, it will not be operable, if that makes sense. This script will basically find these extensions, remove it, add a ransom code to the end of it as an extension, which will be 6 digits containing a mix of letters and numbers. Then what it will do is leave the ransomware note in the directories of those files, and also leave the ransomware note within the startup directory. Now we are ready to deploy this script. I'll press the play button. Please also note that this does not actually encrypt the data. It is just a simulation. Now I can see the jobs are still running. If I type in get-job, I'll see the jobs are still running again, as these jobs will take a few minutes for completion. In the meantime, I can show you the directories that I have set up for this simulation test. So on the C drive, within each directory, we will see files here. For example, here we have a BMP, a doc, and an XLS file. On test FS01, if I check C drive file share, as we can see, the ransomware is starting to take place here. So it is slowly encrypting these files in a simulated manner. Going back to test DC02, if I run get-job, these jobs are still running, yet these jobs should finish up soon. As we can see now, the job for test FS01 has completed, yet the job for test DC01 is still running. This should complete soon. What I will do in the meantime is log off test DC01 or test FS01. And now we can see both jobs have completed. What I will do is log off this device too. During a ransomware incident or on completion of a ransomware incident, there are various things that we may note. The first thing that we would note as a symptom are high technical support calls, and these support calls would be complaining about ransomware notes. We may see databases inaccessible. Files or folders located on file servers may have ransomware notes in directories, and the files may be renamed to extensions containing different sets of numbers and characters. Mailboxes may have strange messages appear, or users' mailboxes may not be accessible. Services that are miscellaneous services hosted on servers may be inaccessible, or websites that may become down or in an offline state or inaccessible. Please note that depending on the environment, depending on how far the cyber criminals have been able to infiltrate a system, and depending on what services they are able to infiltrate, all of this will vary and depend in different circumstances and different cases. So in this instance, as an example, the IT support desk may have gotten a call that some file shortcuts aren't working. There are some strange notes, ransom notes in folder locations, and some files are just not opening. So when we log on to the device, one thing we may note is nothing right away. Yet when we go to the share, we will note all these files labeled as such. And something we did just note as well was a pop-up, which was the ransomware note attached to the startup directory. Here it says, your files have been encrypted as part of a ransomware simulation. Nothing to do here. Yours sincerely, cyber criminal. Now, generally speaking, with these ransomware notes, what we would see is we would see details for contact, such as getting on the dark web and going to a site for a secure channel for them to talk to you. We would see information about money for negotiations. There would also be information about what would happen if you contacted law enforcement and what they would do if you did contact law enforcement. And there would also be a time frame, for example, on how long you would have to contact them. And this information is based on notes that have been released online. Now, as we can see here, these files are now encrypted in a simulated manner, and in each directory there is a ransomware note. If we also check out the domain controller, as we log in, everything looks okay. Yet here we can see there are two files that have been encrypted. We have a verification note, and as per the startup automation, where we put the ransomware note in the startup directory, we can see the same ransomware note. Also on the C drive, under this directory here called white hat down under data, we can see these files here have been encrypted and another ransomware note.